Ayana was hanging upside down from an old wagon wheel, left behind in the middle of a barren patch of land. The ropes dug into her wrists and ankles, stretching her body out in an unnatural position. Blood had dried into dark streaks. Her breathing was shallow and broken, every inhale scraping against her lungs like hot sand. She no longer knew how long she had been there. All she knew was, if the sun stayed still in the sky just a little longer, she would not be able to get back up. Not because of the ropes, but because her will was fading away. In the distance, through the shimmering waves of heat that blurred her vision, a wooden cabin appeared. She could not tell whether it was real or just a hallucination from someone on the edge of collapse. But whatever it was the only thing left standing in that sea of sun. Footsteps echoed on the dry ground. A figure stood before her, tall, silent. The man's eyes held no pity, no curiosity, only the cold, measuring look of someone who had spent too long surviving in the wild. Ayana gathered what little breath she had left. Her voice was hoarse and trembling, but she no longer pleaded with fate. It hurts. Her throat burned. Please, untie it. Let me down. Hot wind swept through. The man did not move. And in that silence, Ayana's life hung in the balance. If you enjoy the way I tell stories, you can subscribe to the channel so we can meet again. The man did not answer right away. Hot wind swept past, carrying the smell of dry earth and rusted metal. Ayana hung there, swaying slightly, her head spinning. Each heartbeat slammed against her temples like a hammer. She did not dare close her eyes. Out in the wild, closing your eyes meant letting go. The man walked slowly around the old wagon wheel, careful, deliberate. His gaze moved over the marks on her body, never lingering on any one spot. There was no prying curiosity, only the cold assessment of someone used to seeing what the desert leaves behind. How long? He asked. His voice was low and dry, stripped of emotion. Ayana swallowed hard. I do not remember. Her throat burned. The sun, it has not moved. He gave a small nod, as if he had expected that answer. Then he bent down and pulled a dagger from his belt. The blade caught the sunlight for a split second, flashing bright enough to make Ayana flinch. She tensed on instinct. The ropes tightened, sending a sharp surge of pain through her body. Do not struggle, he said, unless you want to lose a hand. The blade touched the rope, one clean cut, then another. Ayana dropped, not hard, because he caught her. Her knees hit the ground and her body folded in on itself. The world tilted violently. Strong hands gripped her shoulders, keeping her from collapsing face first onto the cracked earth. Can you stand? He asked. Ayana shook her head. She was trembling, not from the cold, but because for the first time in days, someone had touched her without pulling, without shoving, without hurting her. He did not force her. He simply waited. When her breathing steadied, he let go, turned, and gestured ahead with a short nod. The cabin is over there. Follow me. Slow is fine. Every step was a battle. The short distance between the wagon wheel and the wooden cabin stretched into something endless. When the door finally closed behind her and shade fell over her skin, Ayana realized what she had just survived. The man handed her a bowl of water. Not much, but cool. Listen carefully, he said, his voice low and firm. You can stay here. 1 week. During that time, you do what I say. No questions. You do not go outside unless I allow it. Ayana looked up at him. Her eyes were exhausted, but clear. And after 1 week? He met her gaze. After 1 week, you are free. Outside, the scorched sun still roared. Inside the cabin, a survival pact had just been made, not with ink and paper, but with life itself. The cabin was cooler than outside, but far from comfortable. Shade could block the sun, not the feeling of stepping into a stranger's territory. Ayana leaned back against the wooden wall, the bowl of water cradled between her trembling hands. She drank in small sips, as if afraid that if she drank too fast, it would disappear. The man stood a few steps away, not turning his back, but not coming any closer either. The distance stayed exactly the same on purpose. "Drink enough," he said. "Out here, water is worth more than gold." She nodded and set the bowl down as told. No questions. No arguments. He hung his rifle on a wooden rack, then began speaking short sentences, clear and precise, nothing extra. "For 1 week," he said, "you stay here. You do not leave the cabin when the sun is overhead. You do not touch weapons. You do not open the door unless I am with you." Ayana looked up. "What if someone comes looking for me?" His eyes darkened for the briefest moment. Especially then. Silence fell. She understood exactly what that meant. He turned to a rough wooden table, took out a clean strip of cloth, and placed it beside her. "Wrap your wrists and ankles. Prevent infection. No help, no questions. Just what was necessary." Ayana did as told. Her movements were slow and clumsy, but she did not complain. Every time the cloth touched her skin, memories rushed back, hands that never asked permission, ropes that needed no reason. She clenched her jaw and kept her breathing steady. "What is your name?" he asked suddenly. She froze. "Ayana." He nodded. "I am Elijah." That was all. Nothing more. Elijah pointed to a corner of the cabin. "That is where you sleep. At night, lock the door from the inside." "I stay outside." Ayana followed his gesture. "You are not afraid I will run?" He looked straight at her, his voice calm to the point of cold. "Out there, you would not survive." There was no threat in his tone, only a blunt truth. Night fell faster than she expected. No insects, no cool breeze, only the heavy silence of drought. Ayana lay on the thin blanket, eyes wide open, staring at the wooden ceiling. She heard Elijah step outside, the door locking from the inside. For the first time in days, she was not tied up. But for the first time, she understood that freedom here was something you had to learn how to protect. The first day passed by with a strange kind of slowness. The sun had not fully risen, but the heat was already creeping in through the cracks in the wood, clinging to her skin like an invisible layer of dust. Ayana woke up earlier than she expected. Not because she was used to it, but because she did not dare fall into a deep sleep. She sat up and listened. Outside the cabin, Elijah was already there. His footsteps were steady, firm, moving in a circle like he was checking something unseen. There was no good morning. It was not needed. He pushed the door open and placed a leather water pouch on the table. "You stay inside today," he said. "The sun is harsh." That was all. No asking if she had slept well. No asking if anything still hurt. But the water pouch was placed closer to her side of the table. Ayana noticed that. She did not say anything. She followed the rules he had laid out the night before. Straightened her sleeping area. Gathered dry wood. Lit the fire slowly, carefully, so she would not waste fuel. Every task was done with full concentration, as if one wrong move would get her thrown back into the sun. Elijah watched in silence. He did not stand too close. He did not point or command. But whenever she was about to do something wrong, pour too much water, open the window during peak sun, he said one word. No. One short word. Enough to make her stop immediately. By noon, the sun pressed down on the cabin like a weight. The air was still. Sweat ran down Ayana's spine, but she did not complain. Elijah sat against the wall, cleaning his rifle, his eyes still on the door. "Have you always lived alone?" she asked, her voice low. Elijah did not answer right away. He reloaded the chamber, checked the safety, then finally said, "A long time." The answer did not open a conversation. It closed one. Ayana nodded. She understood. People who had survived this long out here. They all had their reasons to be alone. The afternoon crawled by. The cabin's shadows stretched across the cracked earth. Elijah went out to check the traps and the water supply. He told her to lock the door from the inside. Ayana did exactly that. When he returned, the door was still shut. Elijah paused for a moment before knocking. That knock. It was unnecessary, but he did it anyway. And it made Ayana freeze. For the first time in a long while, she realized something that surprised even herself. In this dry and dangerous place, that quiet man was following rules he did not have to follow. And that made her start to feel safe. The third day of the drought passed in a stretch of silence. The sun had just risen above the ridge of stone when Elijah was already awake. Ayana knew because she heard the wooden door creak, followed by those familiar footsteps circling the cabin. He always made a round before doing anything else, as if the whole dry land needed to be checked every morning. When he stepped inside, Ayana was already sitting up, her back against the wall, wrapping an old cloth around her still aching wrist. She no longer flinched. His presence, in some strange way, had become something she could predict. Elijah placed a bowl of water in front of her. Less than yesterday, but still cool. Today, the sun will stay up longer, he said. Drink slowly. Ayana obeyed. She had come to realize he only said what was necessary, nothing more. And strangely, that made it easier to listen. That morning, he let her step outside for a brief moment, just enough to dry the cloth, to rinse her hands at the small water basin behind the cabin. Elijah stood slightly in the sun, his tall frame casting a patch of shadow over her. Without needing to be told, she stayed within it. Are you used to living like this? He asked, eyes scanning the distance. No, she replied. But I learn fast. Elijah nodded. Good. That one word carried more weight than she expected. By noon, the sun poured down on the cabin roof like molten iron. The air was thick and still. Ayana sat in the corner, stitching her torn shirt with the coarse needle and thread Elijah had given her. Her hands were clumsy, but patient. With each pass of the needle, it felt like she was mending more than just fabric. She was sewing pieces of herself back together, slowly, one thread at a time. Elijah stayed near the door. From time to time, he glanced outside, hand never far from his rifle. Not tense, not paranoid. Just the steady habits of someone who had long made peace with danger. By late afternoon, the dry wind picked up. Ayana heard something faint. She could not tell if it was the wind or hoofbeats. She looked up, instinctively. Elijah stood immediately. He motioned for her to stay back, voice low but firm. Stay inside. She did. Her heart was racing. But when she saw Elijah standing between the door and the world beyond it, she realized something. She no longer thought about running. Night fell, and the cabin was wrapped in a gentler kind of darkness. Ayana lay down, eyes open, listening to the steady breathing of the man on the other side of the inner door. For the first time in a long while, she slept through the night. Not deeply, but enough to dream. A dream without ropes. The fourth day began with hot wind blowing earlier than usual. Ayana woke as sunlight slipped through the cracks in the door, casting pale streaks across the wooden ceiling. Her body ached less than before, but there was still a lingering fatigue, as if every movement reminded her that she was not truly safe yet. Elijah was already at the table. In front of him lay an old map, flattened out and pinned at the corners with small stones. He did not look up when she stepped out, but his voice broke the silence, low and steady. The wind shifted today. She paused. What does that mean? Someone passed through this area in the last 2 days, he replied. Maybe more than one. Ayana felt her stomach tighten. She gripped the cloth in her hand. They are looking for me." It was not a question. It was a fact. Elijah folded the map and stood up. This time, he looked directly at her. His eyes did not soften, but they held no suspicion either. "They do not know you are here," he said. "Not yet." She swallowed hard. What if they find out? Elijah was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke, each word slow and deliberate. "As long as you are here, no one takes you." There was no raised voice, no promises sworn. It was said like a rule, a line drawn in the dirt. Ayanna turned her face away. She did not want him to see her eyes. Memories came without warning, promises never kept, doors slammed shut, pleas that met only silence. "Elijah," she said, her voice rough, "if they offer money or cause trouble, you do not have to." "Not about the money," he cut in. He stepped to the door, checked the wooden latch, then turned back. "And I do not like trouble showing up at my doorstep." The way he said it made her freeze, not because it was cold, but because it gave her a place. Not as a debt, not as a burden, but as someone within the boundary of his protection. That afternoon, Elijah taught her how to read signs in the dry earth, fresh tracks and old ones, how the wind erased them. He did not say much, just pointed and let her learn by watching. "Know what is coming," he said. "You will not panic." She nodded. For the first time, she felt she was not just running. She was learning how to stand her ground. By nightfall, the wind had calmed. The cabin was quiet. Ayanna sat against the inner door, listening to Elijah's footsteps outside. Each one felt like it laid another invisible layer of protection over this place. And then she realized something. Not something that scared her, but something that pulled at her chest. For the first time, someone had chosen to stand with her, without needing to know her whole past. The sixth day began in an unusual silence. No wind, no birds, not even the insects that usually hovered around the cabin before the sun climbed high. Ayanna felt it the moment she opened her eyes. This silence was not peace. It was the feeling of a breath being held. Elijah had been out since early morning. When he returned, his face had not changed much, but the way he closed the door had. Slower, more cautious. He added an extra notch to the wooden latch. "Someone's getting close," he said. Ayanna did not ask who. She only asked, "How close?" "Not to the cabin yet," Elijah replied, "but close enough not to ignore." He laid an old cloth on the floor and used the tip of his knife to draw short lines into the thin layer of dust. Horse tracks, wind direction, places where they had stopped. Ayanna sat across from him, watching every mark he made. "3 men," he said. Her heart pounded harder. "They are looking for me." Elijah did not deny it. "Maybe." She clenched her fists. Old images surged up. Times she had tried to run and failed. Places she thought were safe, but turned out to be just a pause before being dragged away again. She stood up suddenly. "I can leave," she said quickly. "Lead them somewhere else." Elijah stared at her for a long time. Then he shook his head. "Out there, you have no water, no shade. You would not make it past half a day." "Then what if I stay?" she asked, her voice smaller now. He straightened up. "If you stay, at least you still have me here." The words froze her in place. Not because they were harsh, but because they were so clear. Elijah handed her a small knife, not a weapon for fighting, but a tool for cutting rope, whittling wood, surviving in the last resort. "Keep it on you," he said. "Do not use it unless you have to." He checked his rifle, loaded the rounds, and threw on his coat. Before opening the door, he turned back and looked at her. "Lock the door, no matter what you hear." Ayanna nodded. This time, she did not ask any more questions. Time stretched out, melting under the heat. She sat by the wall, every nerve focused on the tiniest sounds. Sometimes she thought she heard hoofbeats in the distance. Other times, it was only the sound of her own heartbeat, too loud in her chest. When Elijah returned, sweat dotted his forehead. His eyes were sharper than before. "They will come back," he said. "Not today. But soon." Ayanna looked at him, her throat tight. "So, does the 1 week still matter?" Elijah answered without hesitation. "Yes." He met her eyes. "Until that week is over, you still have a place here. And, as long as you are here, no one touches you." Outside, the cracked earth remained still. But Ayanna knew. From this moment on, they were no longer just waiting. They were preparing for the confrontation that could not be avoided. Midday came earlier than usual. The sun hung straight overhead, no clouds, no wind. The air was so thick that Ayanna felt even a strong breath might give away her position. She sat close to the wall of the cabin, the small knife Elijah had given her, tucked neatly into her sleeve, her heart beating in short, fast bursts. The sound of hoofbeats echoed, not from far away, but from the edge of the clearing in front of the cabin. Elijah stood just behind the door. He did not open it immediately. He tilted his head, listening. 3 horses. One of them paused too long, a sign of someone watching, not someone lost. A voice rang out in the sunlight, low and rough. "Anyone in there?" Elijah opened the door and stepped out. Just 1 step, no more. Sunlight poured over his shoulders, outlining his tall frame blocking the entrance. "This is my land," he said. "You took a wrong turn." The lead rider gave a dry chuckle. "We are just looking for someone. An Apache girl." Ayanna held her breath. Elijah did not turn around. No one here. The silence that followed stretched tight. Then the man dismounted, took a step forward, eyes drifting toward the narrow crack behind Elijah. "Word is, she did not get far," he said. "If you see her, hand her over. We are not looking for trouble." Elijah placed his hand near his belt. He did not draw the gun. But it was close enough that no one could mistake the message. "Trouble," he said, voice low, "is taking 1 more step." The man's face changed. His fingers twitched. Everything happened fast. A gunshot tore through the still air. Elijah staggered half a step, his shoulder dropping for a heartbeat. But he did not fall. He moved forward, fast and close, giving the man no time to react. Inside the cabin, Ayanna stopped thinking. She rushed out just as the second man was turning, still blinded by the glare. She swung the iron bar used to brace the door. It did not hit his head, but it was enough to send him reeling. Elijah seized the opening. A horse screamed. Dust exploded into the air. The 2 remaining men yanked their reins and pulled back, leaving behind their companion sprawled on the dry ground. Everything fell silent again, just as quickly as it had begun. Ayanna stood frozen, hands shaking. Elijah turned, the fabric of his shoulder dark with blood. "Inside," he said, voice tight but steady. "Lock the door." She obeyed, catching only a glimpse of him bracing himself against the wall before the door closed. Inside the cabin, the shade wrapped around them. Ayanna dropped to her knees beside him, saying nothing. She tore a strip of cloth, pressed it firmly against the bleeding wound. Elijah drew a deep breath, teeth clenched, but his eyes, when they met hers, were clear. "It is over," he said quietly. "You did good." Outside, the sun still burned. But Ayanna knew, from this moment on, the week was no longer a deal. It had become a promise, paid for in blood. Elijah's shoulder was wrapped in cloth. The bleeding had stopped, but his face was still paler than usual. Ayanna sat across from him, back straight, hands still trembling slightly even though everything was over. "Not deep," Elijah said, more to reassure her than himself. "I have had worse." She did not respond, just nodded. She knew what she had just witnessed, and what it had cost. The afternoon passed in silence. The sun was still harsh, but it no longer felt suffocating. The 3 horses had vanished from the horizon. No other sound returned. Elijah made one last round around the cabin before sitting down. He counted the bullets left, cleaned the gun slowly, carefully, like a ritual to close the chapter. By the time he finished, the sun had dipped low. 1 week, he said, breaking the silence. Today is the last day. Ayanna froze. She had known that. But hearing him say it still made her chest tighten. You can leave in the morning, Elijah continued. I will show you the way to the nearest water station. She looked down at her hands. The scrapes had not fully healed, but they no longer stung. She thought about the road out there, the sun, the wind, the vast emptiness, and whatever might still be waiting. What if they come back? She asked. Elijah did not avoid the question. They will not return any time soon, but out there is never safe. Can I stay? She asked, very softly. He looked at her, and this time his eyes were no longer those of a man laying down rules, but of someone offering a choice. Staying, he said, is up to you. Night fell. The sky filled with stars. Ayanna stepped outside for a moment, breathing in the scent of cooling earth. Elijah leaned against the doorframe. He did not follow, did not hover. She looked toward the road, stretching into the distance, the path that had once been her only escape. Now, it was just one choice among many. When she turned back, Elijah was still there. You kept your word, she said. You never forced me. Elijah nodded. I said, 1 week. Ayanna took a deep breath, then slowly closed the cabin door. The wooden latch clicked into place, clear in the quiet night. Then, she said, her voice steadier than she expected, I choose to stay. Not out of debt, not out of fear, but because of you. Elijah looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. No promise was spoken aloud, but in that moment, under a drought that had not yet ended, a survival pact had turned into a shared choice. Outside, the earth was still cracked and dry, but Ayanna knew some kind of rain would come. Morning arrived quietly. Nothing had visibly changed, except for the light softer as the sun rose above the ridge. The drought was still there, the earth still cracked. But inside the small wooden cabin, the air had shifted. Ayanna woke early. She wore Elijah's flannel shirt, the sleeves a bit too long, the fabric carrying the faint scent of sun and wood. The old dress, the only thing left from the days she was hunted, she folded neatly and tucked deep into the corner. Not thrown away, just no longer worn. Elijah sat on the porch, his shoulders still bandaged, eyes on the clearing ahead. He did not ask if she was sure. He did not ask how long she planned to stay. Once a choice was spoken, he treated it as something to be honored. Ayanna brought him a bowl of water and placed it beside him. The wind is light today, she said. Might be hotter. Elijah nodded. Yeah. That was all. But they sat together, sharing what little shade there was. No explanations. No new agreements. The day passed in small tasks. Mending the fence, checking the water barrel, organizing the food stores. Elijah showed her how to read the thin clouds overhead, how to recognize the smell of earth before a storm, even if that storm might still be far away. It does not always rain just because we wait, he said. But waiting still matters. Ayanna understood that in her own way. By evening, the sun softened. She stood at the doorway, looking toward the road that stretched into the distance, once her only escape. Now, it was just one direction among many. She no longer turned her back on the place she stood. Elijah, she said, not looking at him, thank you for keeping your word. He looked at her. So did you. When night fell, the sky was full of stars. No ropes. No hoofbeats. Only the soft wind brushing across the wooden roof. Ayanna closed the cabin door. The wooden latch clicked, not to keep the world out, but to protect a shelter she had chosen. In times of drought, people learn the most important thing. Not everyone survives because they are stronger. Some survive because they find a place that does not force them, and they are brave enough to stay, by their own will. Outside, the earth was still cracked and dry, but somewhere deep beneath that barren surface, a seed of life was waiting, patiently, for the first rain. The drought does not end just because people want it to. It retreats slowly, leaving cracks across the earth, and across memory. But sometimes, it is those very cracks that let the light in. If someone is patient enough to wait. Ayanna stayed in the cabin, not because she needed to be sheltered forever. She stayed because, for the first time, there was a place that did not demand fear as its price. Elijah did not save her with brute strength. He saved her through clear boundaries, by keeping his word, and by respecting her choices, even when that choice might have been to walk away. In the wild, people often believe the strong are those who take control, but the truth is the opposite. The strongest person is the one who knows when to stop, who knows how to say no to possession, and who gives others the right to decide for themselves. True safety does not come from locking the door. It comes from leaving it open and knowing that the person inside still chooses to stay. Ayanna learned that freedom is not about endless running. Freedom is having the calm to stand still, to look directly at the road ahead and choose it, not because you are forced, but because you want to. And Elijah learned that to protect does not mean to control. Sometimes, protecting someone simply means standing firm, so they have something solid to lean on, without losing themselves. The drought will pass, not because the rain comes early, but because people learn how to live with more kindness while waiting. And when that first rain finally falls, what begins to grow will not just be grass and trees, but the quiet, unwavering belief that the right choice, even if quiet, can still save a life. The story you have just followed contains fictional elements, recreated with the support of artificial intelligence. Please listen with your own care and interpretation. These fictional moments are not meant to alter history, but to reflect the spirit of the old American West, a time and place where people lived through harshness, made difficult choices, and accepted the cost of them. Through this story, I simply hope to share a few lasting lessons about kindness, love, and courage, the things that still matter, no matter how much time has passed. Thank you for being here. I wish you peace and good health. If this story meant something to you, feel free to leave a comment. And if you feel comfortable, you can subscribe, so we can meet again.